right, welcome back and thank you for joining me again. My name is Mr. Damien and this is lesson 2 in our chess class. So, in lesson 1, what we learned was all of the pieces and what their actual names were. So, remember, this was the pawn, the knight, the rook, the bishop, the queen, and the king. Sorry. All right. One thing I forgot to add at the end of the last video was whenever I ask the questions at the end, you can just leave those answers in the comment section of this video. So we talked about those pieces and how you set those pieces up. I mean, what those pieces meant. And we also talked about how to set those pieces up. So if you remember our riddle, who can tell, who remembers, who remembers what our riddle was from yesterday? Who remembers? All right, I want to introduce you guys, to some of our classmates. This is going to be Flora. This is Pierre. And this is Harvey, the ape. All right, so sometimes we may not know the answer to the questions, and our classmates are going to help us answer the question. So, does anyone know how, remember what the riddle is for setting up our chess pieces? Pierre? Go ahead, Pierre, give it a try. The king and the queen got married by the two bishops. They rode off on their horses to their castle, and they had 8 little kids. Thank you so much, Pierre. Let's give him a round of applause, please. Okay. All right, so today I told you that we were going to be learning how each of these pieces move. Again, we talked about on yesterday, on our last class, each of these pieces have a different way that they move. And so understand how these pieces move and understand how to use that as a strategy will help you become a better chess player. So what we're going to start off with is the pawn. Remember that the pawn we start off with 8 pawns, 8 black pawns, 8 white pawns. And we also understand that, the pawns are worth 1 point. The pawns are worth 1 point. So we're going to go to our display board for the rest of the class. Just give me 1 second to set up. Okay. So what I'm going to do for the purposes of the rest of this video is I'm going to use only what we need to use. So I'm going to take everything else off of the board. All right, so for the purposes of today's lesson, we're going to just use our light pieces. In this case, they're yellow. Okay? So, remember, these are the pawns. The pawns will either start on the 7th rank or the 2nd rank. Okay? These light square pawns are starting on the 7th rank. Pawns can only move forward. That is how the pawns move. So what I mean by that is this pawn moves like this. These are all legal moves. Okay? The pawn has a choice on its first move to move 1 space or 2 spaces. All of these pawns can do that. So if your pawn is on the 7th rank or the 2nd rank, they have a choice of moving 1 or 2 spaces. Once they move their 1 or 2 spaces, they can only move 1 space at a time. The pawn is the only piece that does not the only piece that does not capture in the same manner that it moves in. The pawn captures diagonally. So what I mean by that is we're going to use the pawn on E, and we're going to move it to the fifth. We're going to move it to E5 for the purposes of this scenario. If you look at this pawn is threatening these two squares. So if there was an actual piece on the dark chess pieces, these would be in danger of getting captured. And the way we capture in chess is just by taking over that square. That's all we do in chess, is we just take over that square officially. Okay? This pawn can only attack these two squares. So if there was a piece right here, that pawn couldn't do anything with that piece. Can only attack those two squares. Okay? Something else important about the pawn is that only the pawn, if it advances to the last rank, which in this pawn's case will be the one rank, it has an option to switch out whatever piece that has been captured for another piece. So it can switch out. In most cases, they'll switch out to a queen, which is why a lot of chess sets start off with 2 queens. So again, this pawn moves straight down. It is worth 1 point. We start off with 8 of them. It captures diagonally, and on the first move, it can move 1 or 2 times. Every move after that, it can only move 1 time. It captures diagonally. So if this pawn captures this piece, it doesn't go back and start moving diagonally here. It continues down this area right here, because that is the new area that it goes in. All right. Any questions? Pierre? Pierre is very talkative today. Pierre wants to know, why do we have 8 pawns and 2 and 1 pieces of the other ones? Well, the pawns are the first line of defense. So since this is the first line of defense, Pierre, you want to have them right. You want to have them protecting what's called your major pieces, which is going to be on that last rank. All right. Let's move on to the bishop. The bishop. Everyone starts off with 2 bishops. The bishop is going to be on a light color square, or is going to be on a dark color square. Once the bishop that is on the light color square starts on a light color square, it cannot go to the dark color square. It is strictly on this square. In fact, this bishop that's on a dark color square does not even see light squares. It doesn't even know that it exists, because it cannot touch it. Same with the light colored bishop. The light colored bishop will the light square bishop will only move on light squared on light square. So they don't switch, and they start one on the other. So if you ever find 2 bishops on the same square and a pawn wasn't promoted, something is probably wrong with the setup. The bishop moves and captures diagonally. What I mean by diagonally is this bishop can move along this line. This bishop can move along this line. Those are all diagonals. This bishop on F, diagonal. And it can move as many spaces as it wants, so long as nothing else is in front of it. If there was this piece in front of this, he could not move. He could move here, but he couldn't move there, because he's being blocked. He needs to have an opening. And if there is an opening, then you want to have him use it. The bishop is worth 3 points. And the bishop also captures in a manner in which it moves. So the bishop captures in the manner in which it moves. So again, just to try some puzzles out, if we had a bishop right here here. And let's see, right here. I'm going to walk you through how all of these bishops can capture these pieces. So this light square bishop, to get to this light squared pawn, would have to, one, that's their first move, and then two, they can capture. And then this dark square bishop only needs one move to capture this bishop. I mean, that's that pawn. And then it can also now move up to this one and then here to that one. And that is how you make legal moves. So that was legal moves as it relates to bishops. Again, we start off with two bishops and they're worth 3 points apiece. Two bishops worth 3 points apiece. Now, the bishop also captures in the manner in which it moves in. So some recaps as it relates to bishops is we start with two of them, one on either color square, light square or dark square. In addition to the bishops, we also, they're worth 3 points. They move along the diagonal, and it captures any square that is in front of that is in the direction of that diagonal, as we did with these examples. Again, 3 points for the bishop, 1 point for the 8 pawns. Now, in our next video, we're going to talk about how the rook moves and how the queen moves, and possibly we'll get to the knight. But by the end of the next few videos, you'll know how all of the pieces move, and you'll be able to start actually making chess-related decisions. One such decision is this. We know that the bishop is worth 3 points, and we start off with two bishops. We know that the pawn is worth 1 point, and we start off with 8 pawns. Which would you rather have? Would you rather have two bishops, or would you rather have 8 pawns? Please tell me why in the comment section. Another question is, if you could compare chess to anything else that you've seen, what would that be? Another comparison, I talked about football, but another comparison to chess can be dancing. If you think about a gymnastic dancer, a lot of her moves are similar to moves that we're going to learn with chess. Sometimes she goes along the diagonal. Sometimes she goes straight, left, right. Sometimes she's only going 1 step at a time. Sometimes she's going 10 steps at a time. That relates to dancing to me in that manner. So to recap, we talked about the pawn. The pawn moves straight up the board. It can only move one space at a time after its first move. On the first move, we have a choice of moving 1 or 2 spaces. We learned about fouls and we learned about ranks. We talked about the bishop and how it's worth 3 points. And we start off with 2, one on a light square and one on a dark color square. Trying to see if there's anything else I want to discuss. All right. I think that will be it. One thing I would like you guys to try on your chessboard is try some of those riddles with that I did with the bishop, like to see if you can put a pawn right here and a bishop there and capture it, because it's going to help you start learning how to play the game of chess. Okay.